Hello and welcome to the first Why Football podcast with me, Michael Dryden, and Netchez Adokwu. Hello, Etch, how are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad actually. I've been watching a fair bit of Bundesliga.
Me too.
As I'm sure you've been watching it. Thuram and Plie had a really good combination of the week, and I think they've got 18 goals and 17 assists between them this season, which I think is pretty good.
Yeah, Plie was at Nice, wasn't he? And then obviously ousted by Balotelli.
yeah, the mercenary, that's Balotelli. And also the Sancho hat-trick as well, which is really good. Obviously, good to see English talent going abroad and doing really well.
Yeah, that's true. Because, he actually didn't start again in the road derby against Schalke and didn't start against Bayern. So I don't know if that's a reflection of how often he starts for Borussia. But obviously he scored a hat-trick in the game against
Paderborn. Your Dryden is beginning to sweat there. But then I think the weekend of Bundesliga and obviously what's gone on recently, I think I was really moved by the solidarity between the celebrations from Thuram, from Sancho and McKinney, is that his name? From
Weston McKinney.
Yeah, Weston McKinney. And I think I was very proud for those players. So I think I actually risked a lot in showing their support for George Floyd. I think what they risked was greater online abuse from certain quarters, being told to stick to football potentially, which can also happen as well. General abuse, just maybe on the streets from people that disagree with their stance, and also future opportunities. I really do think that when you put your heart on the line, so to speak, for something like that, for a movement like that, can be quite risky, and it was actually very inspiring.
Yeah, and financially it can only potentially be detrimental. So if you get dropped by a sponsor, or you don't get that next sponsorship just because you're seen as someone online who might be problematic and isn't running with the brand's party line.
And I think for me personally, it was inspiring enough to use our pods, whether no one listens to it or Phil and his dog, to highlight that for my community, or the black community, that they should keep fighting for the justice for George and for Belly and for the many, many others that have fallen foul of injustice all over the world. I think regardless of what we talk about from Red Bull later on, the main thing I'd like people to take away who want to help is just to listen and to not ignore the abuse and hatred directed at others in society purely because of the colour of their skin, which is who they are, or part of who they are. Yeah. I also want those same people who want to help to continue sharing posts, continue to read informative pieces online so that they can learn and that others can learn as well. And actually the most important bit is, when exposed to racism, whether it's a format at work drinks or within family, don't ignore it, don't tolerate it, don't accept it.
Don't turn a blind eye.
No, exactly. I think the main thing is to challenge it and to help eradicate it, so the world that we're in now can be a better place in the future for everyone. And I think we'll park that kind of to one side now.
But it's definitely something that we need to address prior to talking about the return of football, Project Restart, etc. Because obviously a lot of sportsmen and women across all sports have came out in solidarity. So it's definitely something to touch on before getting into lighter aspects of the pod.
100% agree. But yeah, as Mourinho's teams tend to do, we'll park the bus and leave that there. And we'll move on to something else. And the last bit from the Bundesliga, which I watched on the weekend, was the Route 1 assist from Golaski to Timo Werner. Literally just punted the ball down the field.
Manuel Neuer, take notes.
Yeah, actually, it's quite weirdly satisfying just seeing like one big goal kick and then straight through and there being a goal.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Normally, you like 20 move passes, but I thought that's quite good. But yeah. Anyway, Dryden, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Been excited to record the first pod. Bored of lockdown. I've also been watching quite a lot of Bundesliga. I've been to one Bundesliga game, which was an FC Köln game. I saw the first win of the season, which is interesting because it took place in December in 2018. So that was an interesting experience, but it was good fun. I mean, You can drink on the stands. You can smoke if that's your poison or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, in the Bundesliga this season, I've been watching since the restart. I've been watching Hertha Berlin. They've got some interesting players. Matthias Cunha is a real talent. Came from Leipzig last summer. Javi Dillerson, who's a talented player who came from Man City's academy, much like Sancho did, even though he didn't start there, etc. Marko Grujic, the football manager mercenary, is on loan from Liverpool.
That Marko Grujic, on my football manager, he always ends up at Bournemouth. I don't know why, like, he just always ends up at Bournemouth.
Fair enough.
I haven't got anything else to add.
Well, he's always very highly rated, but then, like, just does nothing and ends up about 20 clubs.
Always Bournemouth, or sometimes West Ham. It's one of those two clubs. Yeah.
So today, Etches will be telling us what he has learned about Red Bull and their involvement in football, with a specific focus on RB Leipzig. This will be part of our Spotlight series addressing wider topics in the game. Please follow us on Twitter at @yfootball_ for future episodes and content. So to kick things off, Etch, how did Red Bull get involved with German football?
Yeah, so we have to go quite a few years back to 2006, where Red Bull attempted to buy a local East German club called FC Sachsen Leipzig. I think that pronunciation is pretty spot on there. The idea was that Red Bull were going to invest, I think it was roughly 50 million over a number of years, and rebrand it under the Red Bull name. However, the DFB, who are the German Football Association, weren't really happy with the proposal. They were concerned that Red Bull would have too much influence at the club, so therefore it was rejected. But this also coincided with massive protests from fans, and in the end Red Bull decided it's best to just withdraw the deal. But Red Bull kept on trying. There were other failed attempts at clubs like St. Pauli and Fortuna Düsseldorf, but there were similar concerns there as well in terms of Red Bull having too much influence, and fans kicked off there, and the DFB got involved again, so it never really got off the ground. Yeah,
I wonder if that's typical of Red Bull's move into other sports. So the extreme sport market, F1, different in terms of their typically individual sports or franchise-based, such as F1. But I mean, it's interesting because Red Bull's base product is an energy drink that has largely remained unchanged, bar different flavours throughout the years. And as far as I'm aware, that is still their main product base. If you go on their website, which I did so before the pod, you can't actually find any reference to their products unless you go into the different parts of the site. Like, it's just purely about their involvement in sports. Like, it's a really good website in terms of design. Like, you've got all the skiing exploits, Formula One, football, just on there. And you really have to dig to find out that they actually make Red Bull cans, a energy drink. But it's not too obvious. But it's interesting because now they've become so much more than that.
Yeah, it is a really interesting point. I didn't know that. Obviously, I don't have as much spare time as you to look into Red Bull's specific
Just a big
products.
fan. Just a big fan.
Yeah, clearly. So let's go from 2006 originally to 2009, where Red Bull decided to return to East Germany. The reason why is there are actually very few big footballing sides in the region. I showed Dryden a few weeks ago a picture of where all the Bundesliga teams are based, and it's actually striking to see how many are in the West compared to the East. So they moved back to the East because the infrastructure is very good. There are very good transport links as well as a really big stadium. And they eventually reached a deal with a team in East Germany called SSV Markensaft, who are in the 5th tier of German football. They were located at roughly 13 kilometers east of Leipzig, so a bit further out.
Yeah, city centre club. So you mentioned Red Bull's previous failed attempts to buy a club or their rights. Why was Markensaft more receptive to investment?
Yeah, I think Markensaft wanted to secure their long-term playing future, and the money from Red Bull helped them do that. So the club actually was taken over entirely for the 2009-2010 season, with the deal being worth roughly 350,000 euros. But then in 2010, after that season ended, so the 2010-2011 season, Leipzig gave Markensaft their second, third, and fourth team back, which it originally needed to be admitted into the league. So Markensaft actually got a promotion, a hefty payout, which secured their future, which overall isn't actually too bad. And then from all of this, before that in 2009, RB Leipzig was actually born. But one thing I wanted to point out was that RB doesn't actually stand for Red Bull. It actually stands for Rasenball. So its full name is Rasenball Sport Leipzig. And it was seen as a really clever way for them to get around DFB's rules with naming the club. So back in 2006, one of the reasons why it got rejected was, they wanted to change the name. So that RB was a clever way of avoiding that. And for your information, Rasenball in English means lawn ball sports.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I've been calling Leipzig Red Bull Leipzig for as long as I've known them. So I guess that's... guess I've been a fool. But yeah, so the closest equivalent you have in England is perhaps Salford City. Obviously a long way off the heights of what Leipzig have got to, but obviously they've came into what was a non-league club in Salford City for different reasons. Obviously you don't have the requirement, the same requirements that you do in Germany for getting a team into the league. But with the class of 92 consortium coming in to Salford and basically bankrolling them. What I didn't realise about Salford, actually, got off topic a little bit, but Peter Lim, the Valencia owner, is a majority shareholder there. So that's alongside the consortium. So they're actually now they've got a lot of backing behind them. And it's
they've got
quite
some firepower.
Sorry?
They've got some firepower.
Yeah, some real firepower.
Yeah, so there's really interesting points, actually. But, obviously Salford are in League Two. But, yeah, I guess they are kind of on a similar sort of path now. It's whether they'll get there or not, or be as successful as Leipzig. We'll
indeed. And they came to criticism for purchasing players and paying wages that are far higher than the clubs around them. Obviously, they've got this backing, and that comes with a lot of stick. Obviously, that it just means that it becomes a bit of a formality in that particular league season. The people around them can't compete.
Exactly.
It does make you wonder, but then that's how you get up to the top in modern football.
Exactly that. And speaking of the top, well, obviously Leipzig now aren't top. I think they're fourth, but from their inception in 2009 to 2019, they've gone up from the fifth tier of German football to Champions League quarter-finalists, which is really crazy. And the Red Bull brand is not just RB Leipzig, have sides in now Austria, Brazil, Germany, the US, and formerly Ghana. So that this ever-growing sort of brand.
Yeah, that's interesting. I bet most aren't aware of their ventures into, say, Brazil and Ghana. But generally, how does their ownership of these clubs work in terms of structure and decision-making?
Yeah, in terms of structure, RB is set up in a pretty similar way compared to most other German clubs. But there are massive differences in the way it admits its members. And members play a really key role in Germany because they have the 50+1 rule. So the 50+1 rule is basically that fans must own 50% of shares in the club plus one share to limit private influence, unless if the private investor has been involved with the club for over 20 years. Like Bayer and Volkswagen with Leverkusen and Wolfsburg. But on a side note, imagine if that rule existed in England, because obviously football here is so expensive.
So commercialised.
Yeah, exactly. I did some research, and the highest season ticket price in Germany is £842, compared to in England, the highest is £1,995 to watch Jose Mourinho park the bus.
Just some context that Etches is an Arsenal supporter. Hence the negative tones towards King Jose.
But there's no bias at all.
No bias, completely impartial.
Yeah,
I'll try my best to balance up that impartiality if possible. There was a stage when Arsenal fans were paying similar sums to watch Lord Bentner and Shamak, for example, at the Emirates. So
no comment.
No comment. I'm a Sunderland fan. Lord Bentner did score a penalty at St James's Park for Sunderland, so I only have good things to say about him. But yeah, it exemplifies the difference between the English and German fan experience. So yeah, it's linked to the commerciality and competition of the Premier League. It means that clubs have to squeeze every penny But it is refreshing that in Germany you still do have ceiling to an extent of season tickets and matchday tickets.
Yeah, I really like it because I think it gives power back to the fans, which I think is really, really important. But yeah, the situation at Leipzig is basically that 99% of the shares are owned by Red Bull, with 1% being owned by the club. So in order for them to comply with the 50+1 rule, that 1% has 100% of the voting rights. So you're probably thinking, okay, that's not too bad. Leipzig, however, only has 17 members, and they're all employed either directly or indirectly by Red Bull. So straight away you're thinking, okay, so Red Bull essentially control the club, and there's no fan input in terms of voting. Fans can pay up to £1,000 a year for a gold membership, but they still won't have any voting rights. But for that amount of money, maybe get a picture of the coach, maybe Nagelsmann.
Nagelsmann, interesting choice for Tyre in the restart in the Bundesliga.
I just don't look. You can wear a suit, you can wear a tracksuit, club tracksuit. I just don't think you can wear a Nike t-shirt, some weird trousers that are turned up, ankle socks.
It looks a bit like, I don't want to be rude, but it looks a bit like he's been kicked through Sports Direct.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a bit rude.
There have been 4 games and he hasn't really done well in any of the 4 games.
I'd be wearing the club stash, the club attire.
It's a safe bet.
I've got to that position where I'm now at a Champions League club. You know, I know he's only 32, but I've worked towards it for a while. I'd be going to bed in the stuff.
Yeah, true. So yeah. Well, I certainly wouldn't be wearing a Nike t-shirt like that. I think that's a big red flag.
Offside flag.
Yeah, offside flag indeed.
So how is their ownership being received by fans in Germany?
Yeah, home fans don't like it that much because they feel that they have no say in the club compared to other German sides. And they also feel that there's no identity away from their Red Bull sponsor. Opposing fans, on the flip side, they feel like RB has bought their success and as a result has kind of ruined the integrity of the 50+1 rule by kind of bypassing it.
Yeah, it's unsurprising. It does provide wider questions of, would you sacrifice tradition, heritage for money and success in the game? I mean, I can see how some fans may not want the club to be part of the Red Bull marketing exercise that a lot of the franchises have become. And, you know, perhaps fans could look at their own clubs in England and Germany, wherever, and see who's actually owning your club. I mean, while it might not be a big, you know, overt enterprise such as Red Bull, you're still probably part of a business portfolio by some owner or someone. You think like Fenway Sports Liverpool, for example, they own sports teams in America. So you've got to look at, you know, is it actually too different to what we already have in certain aspects, perhaps in Germany, but globally, you know, is it too unsurprising to see or too different? But football fans are always going to be purists in that sense, that they want their local community at heart. They want a custodian in charge of their clubs. So yeah, it's interesting. And the current COVID situation has kind of emphasised how, you know, empty stadiums, the lack of fans generally, how important fans are to the game.
Yeah, very.
It's kind of a side point, but
yeah, I think in the UK, especially with increasing season ticket prices and just generally real fans being kind of squeezed out the game, I think you're right. COVID has definitely highlighted how important they actually are for the success of any sides.
So getting back to the Red Bull network, is there much movement between the clubs?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, Red Bull have teams in Germany, Austria, America, and Brazil, and that allows for the fluid movement of players as well as coaches. So Konrad Lehmer, Peter Golaski, Naby Keita, who Liverpool fans will know really, really well, and Dio Uncano have all moved from Salzburg to Leipzig in recent seasons. Looking at from a manager side, former New York Red Bulls coach Jesse Marsch joined Leipzig as an assistant manager and then actually moved on to Salzburg to become manager. And then if you look at the stateside in terms of personnel, you have Tyler Adams, who left New York Red Bulls to join RB Leipzig. I think it was sometime last year. So you can kind of get the picture of all these different coaches and players moving from different continents, in and out between various sides.
Yeah, it's interesting. You wonder if Werner was to leave Leipzig with his €50 million release clause if we're going to see another move from Salzburg across to Leipzig. There's Patson Daka, for example, and Seydou Koita, who I signed up for manager. They're two players, for example, that I come across. And you do wonder if Leipzig is the main project in that regard, because as you said, there's been so much movement. So what about Red Bull's presence in Brazil? Can you elaborate?
Yeah, so Red Bull set up a side in 2007 called Red Bull Brazil.
Nice.
Yeah, very obvious name. But they failed to reach the top league there, which was their main aim. So they decided to enter a partnership with a club called Clube Atlético Bragantino, who they felt stood a better chance of achieving their goals. In April 2019, they had a big rebrand and are now called Red Bull Bragantino. And that former Red Bull Brazil side now serves as a development team within state football.
Oh, interesting. Any other sides? Notable sides?
Yeah, there's one I haven't really touched on called FC Liefering. They're a not too well-known feeder club for Salzburg in the Austrian second division, and they can't get promoted. Kind of like Barca B.
Yeah. Or Real Castilla, It's interesting. Salzburg recently won the Austrian Cup, actually. But they are second in the Austrian first division, so I wonder if that owes to their sales. Haaland, Minamino, a number of the players that you mentioned. But they do have 14 different nationalities in their first team squad, which is crazy. I've mentioned a number of players from. They've got a number of players from Africa come through. So it seems like it's a bit of a breeding ground for these players to come prove themselves in the Austrian league before perhaps moving further afield to the German league, for example, going to Leipzig. Both Salzburg and Leipzig have been successful under the Red Bull brand and built strong teams fairly quickly. Do they have a particular philosophy for signing players?
Yeah, all the clubs seem to have a strong emphasis on youth and not spending huge amounts on players. I think their record transfer across all the clubs is 27 million for Naby Keita, who they ended up selling for double that at least.
Over double, yeah.
So if you look at the clubs individually or generally, Leipzig have the youngest squad in the Bundesliga at 24.2, Salzburg in Austria at 23.7, and New York Red Bulls at 25. And if you look at the managers, it's similar as well. I mean, Nagelsmann is only 32, which is crazy. So young.
What am I going to be doing at 32?
Yeah, I know. not much, I'll tell you that.
Not good.
And Jesse Marsch, who's the coach at Salzburg, is 46, which if you compare to the Prem average at 50, is pretty good as well. But that average itself is probably hiked up quite a bit by King Roy and Don Carlo Ancelotti. I think they...
the monarchs of the Premier League, nice
yeah, I think they do. But on top of all of that, because we mentioned the movement of players, you're probably thinking who is actually in control of that. And it's a guy called Ralf Rangnick, who actually was interviewed for the England job ages ago before they gave it to Southgate. And he's managed various German sides like Hoffenheim and RB Leipzig, actually, and was the former sporting director to RB Leipzig and Salzburg. And now he sits on top of all of that as head of strategy and development.
That's interesting. He came from being a manager and he's moved up the hierarchy into the club and the whole network. King Roy seems like an eternal man because he's one of them characters that I don't think many people from our generation, or say anyone in their 20s or early 30s, really knew who Roy was unless you're really learning the game until he moved back to Fulham, or back to England to go to Fulham from his European exploits. And then he went to Liverpool. And at that point, he was no spring chicken, was he?
Yeah, not quite.
And it's just interesting to see him back, but he's done well at Palace.
Yeah, he's doing all right.
So we've talked at length about RB Leipzig, Salzburg, and Red Bull's sport and presence around the world. I suppose the last question has to be, will Red Bull come to England?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what's been clear from my research is that Red Bull, despite its critics, has been such a successful organisation that's constantly growing and evolving. I think not just in terms of its drinks, but also in terms of the clubs that it has. So Leipzig are extending their stadium potentially. And with it being a dominant player in the extreme sports world, you know, having a competitive F1 team, having a successful drinks brand behind it, there's no reason why it wouldn't have the resources to further expand its football network. Maybe in the not too distant future we will see a Red Bull in England, but who knows?
Yeah, but it has the resources and also less restriction in England. You mentioned
exactly.
the 50+1 rule, for example, in Germany. Seems like coming into an English club would be a lot smoother, perhaps. And yeah, as you said, Red Bull can come in with a proven model of rapid success, and it's been applied across different sports. It's been applied in football across different teams. This would likely be well received for fans of clubs, perhaps clubs such as Bolton, Blackburn, Charlton, Coventry City, Sunderland, who used to be in the Premier League, that have big infrastructure that are kind of prime targets for this sort of investment. And those clubs have been mismanaged financially in the past by owners, or simply have just been spent in the wrong ways. Red Bull seem to have this model that has worked across multiple sports. And English football fans are very much used to this highly commercialised game. So I don't think there's much uproar as what there has been in Germany in terms of someone buying numerous players, paying high wages to win, pay to win kind of thing. I don't think there'd be the same sort of uproar. I'm
not sure whether fans would be that receptive though. I know, if you pay to win, fans kind of go quiet. But I just feel with the uproar in Germany, I could just see certain diehard fans kicking up a fuss. Whether it would be a big enough fuss for them not to actually enter to begin with remains to be seen. But I just feel the issues of Germany for Red Bull could make them a bit wary with trying to come to England.
Yeah, and well, certainly, I don't think you'll see or would be as popular the rebranding exercise of these clubs. I can't see teams like historic teams, old teams like Bolton, Blackburn, for example, Charlton, Coventry, changing their name, changing their stadium name, changing their badge. It's a big change. And is that going to be a requirement for Red Bull coming to the sport? You think it wouldn't necessarily need to be, but they're going to want their brand somewhere, otherwise they wouldn't have done it elsewhere, which they obviously have very overtly.
Exactly.
That's it for this week's podcast. Thank you to Etches for the research and insight. Please follow us on Twitter at yfootball_ for links to future pods and content. Please feel free to leave comments, feedback, and of course ideas for future pods. We're very much football fans, just like you, so we'd like to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you.